Welcome to the webinar series of the ESCP Geopolitics Institute. Today, we will address a very important topic for the geopolitical stability of the Middle East and beyond, the Iranian situation. Iran is currently facing a deep political crisis marked by recurring popular uprising and increasingly harsh repression. At the same time, the United States is preparing for the possibility of an intervention while keeping the door open for negotiation. Beyond the question of regime survival, the destabilization of Iran would have major consequences for the security of Middle Eastern countries, and it will also renew the concern over the future of Iran's nuclear program. Can the Iranian regime withstand internal unrest and external pressure? What will be the implications for regional stability and nuclear security if the regime flatters? In order to address this question, we are very pleased to welcome two experts in the topic. So first, Mr. Bernard Hourcade. Bernard is a geographer, Emeritus Senior Researcher Fellow at Research Center on Iran at CNRS, also a member of the editorial board of Orient 21. Bernard is an expert on Iranian society and policy, which he experienced from the inside while being the director of the French Institutes of Iranian Study in Tehran between 1978 and 1992. He recently published, a few days ago, an article in Diplomacy, a leading article, on title Iran, une crise existentielle. Thank you very much for being with us. We are also welcoming Michele Gaieta. Michele is a specialist in nuclear proliferation and international security. He teaches in several institutions, among which ESCP in Torino, in our Italian campus, but also at ACERI, the Graduate School of Economics and International Relations of the University Cattolica, and at the Catholic University of Milan. He recently published an article in the think tank AFERI on Iran's nuclear program after the 12 days war. Each of our experts will address a specific dimension of the debate. We will then, as usual, open the floor for discussion and question. So we'll start with Bernard, who will share his expertise on the current state of the Iranian society and will discuss the political power within and beyond the Khomeini regime. We'll then follow up with Michele, which will give us insight on the nuclear program and the impact of the war of 12 days, addressing negotiation and destruction and trying to draw a state of the current military capacities. The debate, as usual, will be moderated by my colleague, Professor Maxime Lefebvre, co-director of the ESCP Geopolitics Institute. Please do not hesitate to ask your question, to write your question in the Q&A tag that you will find below, and you may actually start asking your question during the presentation. They will be responded shortly. No doubt that this discussion will offer a rigorous and forward-looking analysis of Iran's internal crises, regional security dynamics, and nuclear challenges. So let's now start this webinar, whom I recall the title, What Future for Iran Under Internal and External Pressures? So Bernard, the floor is yours.
Thank you, ESCP, and Vanessa for these words of welcoming and a good opportunity for me to speak about Iran, since Iran is not a well-known country, it's a wrongly known country, and people have got ideas about Iran. Everybody has got ideas about Iran, but let us go back to the facts as far as we can. The first point I would like to focus on is the fact that the relation between Iran and the United States is the core of the problem. The core of the problem, and so the negotiation today between Iran and the US is, I think, the main important thing, much more than the threat of the armada of Trump, which is, of course, an important topic we shall discuss it about. But negotiation is very important. Since the problem started, in the 4th of November, 1979, when the American embassy was taken by the Islamic militants, and this hostage-taking has been a drama for the US, for the diplomats of the US, even especially for the Democrats, which got the power on that time. And so this non-relation, this conflict between the Great Satan and Islamic Republic was the core of all the problems of the Iran-Iraq war to try to save the hostages, and then the strengthening of Saudi Arabia against Iran, and then the strengthening of Hezbollah to fight Israel, which was opposed to Iran. So all the Middle East was built up in that time around the Iran-US conflict. We have to remember that on that time, the main question was the Cold War. USSR was in the front, in the border of Iran, the northern border, and the threat was that if the regime is supported by the US, is defeated in Iran, the Soviet forces will be able to enter Iran to take the oil of the Persian Gulf, which is, of course, a major security issue. So we have to think about the fact that the debate or the conflict between Iran and Saudi and the States was in that framework very sensitive, and the outcome of it was a never-ending war, but with no casualties. The war was with everybody, but not between the US and Iran. The only war occurred a few months ago in last June when they tried to bomb the nuclear facilities. So this question is the core of the system, because the ideology of the Islamic Republic is built up on the opposition to the West and to the US. It's also an economic problem, since the sanctions by the US against Iran have completely destroyed the Iranian economy, and much more important, has built up all the system of the oligarchs in Iran, all the system of corruption in Iran, all the strengths of the RGC on the Repression Guard and the clerics on the other side, which were able to get a lot of money on the black market and get a huge, very huge amount of money because of the sanction. So the sanction was a problem for the people of Iran, but a very nice question, the opportunity for the people in charge of the regime. So the question is ideological, is economic, and of course, it's a political issue, major issue, since in Iran, which is an isolated country, they would like to have international relations with whom? With China, with Saudi Arabia, with Russia. Obviously, the Iranian society doesn't want, they want to have friendly relations with China, Russia, and any country in the world, but they're looking much more towards California than Beijing. So it is a global question that we are facing now about the relation between Iran and the US. And this is the core of the problem. So when recently Donald Trump said, "Oh, go on the streets, take the city centers. I'm coming. Support is coming." He was right, I think. Everybody was thinking that he was coming with bomb, with his navy, with his missiles, with all these rockets and so on, and the military forces he has got. The military issue was on the agenda just after the war of September conducted by Israel. We are thinking about war. It may occur, of course, but the main point was to make pressure on the Iranian government to negotiate. Trump wants Iran to be a strong country in its own hands. The question is not to destroy Iran. The question is to use Iran as a major country between China and Europe. And so the economic project of Trump was more important than winning a small war, which cannot have any political outcome. You can kill the supreme leader of Iran. You can kill some general, some head of the system. The system is strong enough to find a new way to survive. But in the US, it's not ready to send on the ground 300,000 soldiers. That's clear. So changing a regime through war was not possible. But changing a regime through negotiation and dollars, instead of wars, of weapons, we have got dollars. And the US has got dollars, the capacity to lift the sanctions, which are very important for the people of Iran, for the state of Iran. And this sanction has to be lifted. It can be lifted very quickly because Iran has got a lot of assets frozen in South Korea, for instance, in France, in Europe, in the UK, everywhere in the world. So billions of dollars can enter again Iran, and of course, give a little bit of oxygen to the people, of course, oxygen to the regime. But I think this is not the main issue. But so the US policy about Iran is much more dollars than bombs, in my opinion. Even, of course, if bombing is not out of the scenarios. Third point, the nuclear issue. The nuclear issue is a keystone of all the problems. Since, as you know very well, in 2003, Iran, with, at that time, it was Mr. De Villepin, Stowe and Fischer, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of France, the UK, and Germany, went in Iran in October 2003. And in the time of 4 hours, they have obliged the Iranian government to implement completely the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and to stop completely the hidden military program, nuclear program. So on that time, it was a starting point of a debate, of a discussion between Iran and the Western world and the international community towards the nuclear. And of course, in July 2015, the JCPOA was an agreement, not perfect agreement, but an agreement between Iran and the whole international community, including China and Russia, EU, to stop and to control the nuclear facilities of Iran, and giving Iran the right to enrich uranium in the limits of 3% allowed by the International Organization of Nuclear Energy. So the nuclear issue is very well documented. All the people in charge of that know exactly what is possible to do, what not possible to do, and so on and so forth. We shall discuss, of course, about the fact that all these facilities have been widely damaged in the War of June, which is another issue. But the question of the nuclear question, is, you know, a question of the UN Security Council, of the 5 nuclear members, personal members of the UN Security Council. It is a matter of pride, a matter of nationalism. It is not only a matter of a military matter, it's a matter of national identity and so on and so forth. We know that very well about Iran. So since this question is important for Israel, of course, which has made the nuclear issue as an existential threat for Israel. It's of course important for non-proliferation. If Iran gets a bomb, many countries will have it. So it's not possible. So it's really the core of the problem, but a problem which was very big, very included in the Cold War time. The Cold War is no longer exists. So we have to think again about the nuclear issue in the current situation. JCPOA did that. And today, of course, the nuclear issue is a matter of debate, no matter of a red line, even if in this debate there are some lines, red line, of course. So I think that solving the nuclear, finding a political solution, a diplomatic solution to the nuclear issue is a keystone of everything. Since this problem is solved, it needs that on the other side, that the US will lift sanctions and allow some dollars frozen in South Korea or somewhere other place to come back to Iran. So the economic situation will improve. But, and that's my last point, the Islamic Republic is weak now because on Islamic affairs, they have lost the war against the young ladies. The veil, the Islamic veil, is no longer a matter of debate in Iran. It is not wearing a veil is allowed in Iran, as a matter of fact. It's a major cultural, religious defeat for the clerics. Iran is no longer the Iran of the mullahs. Second defeat is after 7 October. Hezbollah, Bashar al-Assad, all the proxies of Iran have been defeated. And Iran is not able again to use this threat against Israel, against the West. So the IRGC, the elite of the Iranian army and ideology have been defeated. The clerics have been defeated. And the society, and the regime has no choice. The economic crisis is so high, so huge today, that the regime is facing every year, every 2 years, a major revolt and riots in the streets, and they cannot control that any longer. They couldn't control that about women and the veil, and they know that if the economic crisis is going on and on more deep, it will not be possible for them to control. So last attempt they did is to massacre and the slaughter of last January, because they have no other solution than killing the people. It means it's not an issue, it's not an outcome possible for a state. So on all fields, they are losing about the clerics, the RGC, and the people. And so what can I do if I am the leader of this Islamic Republic to save what I can save, to survive a little bit, or at least to go out of this ship which is sinking now? What can I do to save something, to negotiate? I must negotiate with the great Satan, with the great devil, with the US. It means suicide. Because my ideology, the basement of my stress, political stress, the basement of my nationalism, my opposition to all the world is my opposition to the US system, economic, cultural, political, and so on and so forth. So if I allow my government to sign an agreement with this devil, I lose my authority, who I am. I betray my ideology. I am no longer the head of the Islamic Republic. So, but I have no choice. I have to find, of course, saving the face. I must save the face in this space on the other wall. But I am defeated completely on all fields. But it is the only way out to save at least my life or the life of my friend and all the money I have got in Dubai or in other places. So the main point I will conclude on that situation, on that fact, is that today Iran has no choice than to negotiate. And of course, some people, some countries and forces are against this project. Because if Iran gets an agreement with the US, it means that Iran will become, after some years, some time, a quiet country. Even the Islamic regime can change, or at least the policy of Iran may change. The relation with the region, especially with Saudi Arabia, may improve better. And of course, Iran will be a strong country in the Middle East, having a population of 92 million inhabitants, the best educated in the world, having the strong experience of 47 years of Islamic Republic, of political Islam. So they don't want to try a new Islamic revolution that in some countries they have done in Egypt or Tunis or in other countries. So Iran will become a strong country. So Israel don't want Iran to be a strong country. The nuclear issue is, of course, a problem, but Israel knows very well. There have been several times in Israel to discuss this point, that for Israel, the nuclear missile from Iran is not a danger. They have got 200 missiles for themselves. So it's not a military issue. It is an existential issue because Iran could be the main challenger of Israel in the Middle East. And of course, the Abraham agreements, even Israel, and of course, the bombing of Qatar, and what is happening in Gaza, Israel now is seen in the Muslim world as a major threat for the identity of the people and the regime outside Israel in the Middle East. So Israel is against this agreement, but also the royalists. And recently, the Pahlavi operation, I say that, Mr. Reza Pahlavi has been pushed by the media in the front of everything, especially in France. 2 days ago, he was in TF1 at 20 o'clock in the evening. So, and he appears that being the only man in the world able to manage a transition between the current situation and the future. But he is the best. Everybody knows that he is a puppet of Israel, more or less, and supported by them financially and so on. So I don't think it is possible to be in the future an accepted leader by Iranian population, which are opposed to him for different reasons. And the third allies in this opposition to the negotiation, Israel, the royalists, and the hardliners in Iran. The hardliners, they are sitting around the supreme leader. They don't want to negotiate with the great devil, with Satan. They don't want an agreement with the US. They know it would be committing suicide. So opposed to the JCPOA in 2015. And they had to accept it because no choice. And there was a balance and possibility to find their way for the regime to survive. But today, the regime cannot survive after the collapse of the Mullah, the Hezbollah, and the slaughter of last January. And so they know they have no choice than negotiating with the US. And now the key issue is, I conclude on these words, in the end of the people of Iran. The people were out of the game. Iran is not a democracy. The people can vote in Iran, but under control. So today, the people of Iran, very diverse, of course, some supporting the regime, not supporting, some having a high level standing of living, others not. But all these people, they know that the future of the country is in their own hands. And they don't want to give the other people, Israel, the king of somebody else, in my opinion, the floor to resume the new situation of Iran. And they want to control the relation between them and the US and to face with the US, proud Iran, a small country, a middle-scale country, facing the greatest power in the world. For the nationalist pride in Iran, it's quite important. So I do think that the key issue will be in this negotiation, which can, of course, be destroyed by military attack by Israel or even by Trump if the pressure is not sufficient. But and the nuclear issue being the keystone of the negotiation, the first point from which major change can occur in this country. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernard. So I pass the floor to Michele to focus more on the nuclear issue. Can you explain to us the nuclear issue of Iran since 2003, where we are now, and what are the possible scenarios?
Yeah, thank you, Maxime, and thank you for having me. It's clearly a pleasure to participate in this webinar in a very critical moment. Bernard has a long experience of Iran and also see different evolution. And from my personal view, which is mostly centered on the Iranian nuclear program, which is the lens of analysis through which I study the country, is one of the more critical moments in the last 20 years regarding the country itself and the evolution of the Middle East. The nuclear program, as mentioned by Bernard, has been not just a technical or energetic issue, it's been intertwined with the regime identity, the regional posture of the country, the relation with major powers. So it's important to understand the crisis and how it has evolved through a brief historical overview, because it will be also relevant to address the current situation. It's interesting to note, as mentioned by also Bernard before the meeting we were talking about, that the Iranian nuclear activity predates the Islamic Revolution. In the 50s and the 60s, during the Atom for Peace program, the US provided a small laboratory scale activities and a research reactor to Tehran, which was placed in Tehran Nuclear Research Center. In the 70s, the dramatic increase in the oil prices following the Yom Kippur War provided Iran the revenue for fueling a significant nuclear program, which was devised by the Shah to produce at least 20 gigawatt of nuclear electricity in 20 years' time. At this stage, and I mention in this passage because it's interesting to understand also some elements related to the present situation. At this stage, Iran did not develop enrichment activities. However, it refused to potentially renounce to reprocessing capabilities. These are the two dual-use processes which can be used to shift from civil to military application of nuclear energy. Indeed, after the test of India in 1974, the United States was demanding stricter non-proliferation guarantees, including the return of the spent fuel. The Shah at the time rejected such a constraint as incompatible with the sovereign right, arguing that no major European country and companies was there to ask similar limitation. And this is why, despite the close strategic alignment between the Shah and Washington, it were a European company, in particular a German and French company, which finally constructed the nuclear power plants in Bushehr and Darkovie. So in 1979, the revolution abruptly ended this phase. The contract was suspended, the cooperation collapsed, and the program stalled amid a revolutionary turmoil and the outbreak of the Iran-Iraq War in 1980. So this war I would tend to think that Iran has been forged by this war because absolutely reshaped Iran's strategic thinking. And in this phase, energy consideration became secondary. So Tehran sought to acquire capability that could potentially match Iraq's suspected nuclear ambition, provide a long-term deterrent against Baghdad's repeated use of chemical weapons in the battlefield. It was the first and more important use of chemical weapons against a country since World War I, and to counter Iraq rocket and missile strike. Both the missile and the nuclear program was therefore at the time conceived under some important and relevant condition in the more difficult security concern the regime has faced up to date. So for both the missile and the nuclear program, Iran required foreign partners to accelerate technological development. but the diplomatic isolation made foreign cooperation very difficult. So in this nuclear field, beyond some cooperation with China on conversion laboratory scale activities, some key enrichment technology came through the clandestine network of EQCAN, which transferred design, centrifuge components, technical blueprints to several countries, including Iran, Libya, and North Korea. So despite a significant problem and sanctions and pressure, the long-term trajectory of Iran nuclear program progressively emphasized self-sufficiency, which became not merely a practical necessity, but a political objective in itself, which was tightly linked to the regime's survival and national identity. So after the war, and we are going closer to nowadays, the regional threat environment changed, but did not disappear. The 1991 US international-led campaign against Iraq demonstrated the overwhelming American conventional superiority. And even though Iran moderated its foreign policy under President Rafsanjani, it remained treated, in particular by the United States, as a pariah state, subject to containment along with Iraq, and through economic sanction and military pressure. So these strategic environment reduced pressure for Iran, but did not alter Tehran's long-term commitment to developing dual-use technology. So the objective was not to build a crash program like Iran in the 90s aimed at rapid weaponization, but the gradual construction of a comprehensive indigenous fuel cycle, also in support of a civilian nuclear power plants. Thus, in the last part of the 90s, Iran expanded significantly its nuclear infrastructure. Among the facilities built at the end of the 90s, the more significant was the plant in Natanz, which was designed as an industrial-scale enrichment centrifuge facility. The construction of Natanz marked a qualitative leap forward in Iran's nuclear capability, because moved beyond laboratory-scale research toward the capacity to produce enriched uranium in significant quantities. So without entering into a legal detail debate whether or not Iran was formally required to declare the plans under the Comprehensive Safeguard Agreement at the time in force with the IAEA, the scale of the facility, the fact that its existence was publicly disclosed in 2002 by an exposition group, brought the nuclear program under intense scrutiny by the International Atomic Energy Agency and the broader international community. And this was, at the beginning of 2003, the moment in which the Iranian nuclear question started to surface as an effort by the IAEA to reconstruct Iranian nuclear program, assess possible violation of safeguard obligation, and clarify the extent of enriched undeclared activities. During this program, this process of verification, additional information emerged concerning activities that went beyond dual-use research. According to IAEA assessment, Iran had conducted structural studies and preliminary research related to the weaponization process, the one device to build a nuclear device. The apparent purpose of these studies was to establish a technical pathway that could enable a move towards weapon acquisition in event of political decision, a decision where today has never been taken by the regime. These more sensitive aspects of the program as appear, according to the IAEA reports, being organized between 1998 and 2003, when the US led military operation in Iraq, combined with the pressure of the presence of military forces in Afghanistan, significantly altered Iran's threat perception. So at the time, under intense military pressure, Iran appeared to have halted the structured weaponization activities, which was a suspension not declared, and agreed, as mentioned by Bernard before, to the suspension of enrichment activities as part of a broader priority recalibration. At that time, it was Hassan Rouhani, at the time it was president of Supreme National Security Council, which negotiated with the Troika the suspension as a confidence-building measure. At that time, a dual track followed, a technical cooperation with the IAEA to resolve past issues, an attempt to open a broader Great Bargain, proposing a discussion on a wider regional security framework which could refine a possible coexistence with the United States. An offer which Washington refused to recognize as there was no recognition of Iran's right to enrich and was not an address of the complex bargain regarding Iran's security concern. The deadlock led to the restart of Iran enrichment activities under President Ahmadinejad. And the Iranian file moved from the Iranian board of the IAEA board of government to the United Nations Security Council, which adopted the sanction which have been significantly hampered the Iranian economy from 2006 to 2010. This measure was then implemented along with unilateral further sanctions by the United States and European Union. Each time that this pressure had been imposed, Iran responded by expanding Iranian nuclear capability. The start of enrichment in hardened facilities such as Fordow increased the level of enrichment up to 20%, which is a critical threshold for possible military diversion. So the cycle of pressure and nuclear escalation marked a securitization spiral, which was temporarily broken in 2013. At that time, for the first time, there was a positive diplomatic alignment between Tehran and Washington, with President Hassan Rouhani and Barack Obama, President Obama, which both signaled readiness for a negotiated understanding. It was the first agreement in interim, which was reached in 2013, and then a joint comprehensive, a long-term agreement in 2015. It's interesting to note, as mentioned before by Bernard, that the JCPOA was built on a clear methodological choice, which is to isolate the nuclear file for other security disputes and focus on a technical solution to a specific proliferation risk. The agreement was also based on two central objectives for the international negotiators, the 5 members of the United Nations Security Council, plus Germany and the European Union. The goal was to constrain Iran nuclear program, so for a significant period of time, at least 10 years, and in order to extend the breakup time, so the time to move that Iran can have for move from civil to military application. And also it was to provide the IAEA with enhanced monitoring and verification mechanism to inspect these commitments. For Iran, the objective was equally clear, which was to accept substantial limitation on part of its nuclear program in exchange for the removal of the international sanctions. And this logic was captured in Rouhani formulation that Iran centrifuge should spin as well as the country economy. And this position reflected the approach of pragmatic and reformist actors within Iran, which think that which did not deny the symbolic value of the nuclear program, but emphasized the economic cost of confrontation, costs that, in their view, were not unlimited if they are impacting the long-term stability of the regime. So despite the fact that Iran fully complied with the JCPOA, President Trump's election led to a fundamental shift. In 2018, the withdrawal from the agreement and the imposition of a policy of maximum pressure. This includes the restoration of sanctions, as well military and security measures aimed at countering Iranian regional influence, and the killing of Qasem Soleimani, commander of Quds Force, which project regional influence of the country in 2020, symbolized this escalation of confrontation. So in parallel, Israel intensified its own, at that period, shadow campaign against Iranian nuclear infrastructure, intelligence operations, sabotage inside Iranian facility, and the assassination of Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, which is widely considered a central figure in Iran's past weaponization activities. These further increased the tension, including new documents signed by Israel in Iran on past weaponization activities, which did not alter the picture of the IAEA knowledge on these activities, but require additional clarification with Tehran, complicating the relation with the agency and leaving some questions open up to nowadays, which led to the June of last year Board of Governors resolution asking Iran for clarification. As in previous phase, Iran responded to this international pressure by gradually scaling back its commitment under the JCPOA, by exceeding the limits of enrichment, the stockpile, and eventually enriching uranium up to 60%. Which is a level which can be considered technically already military grade, if it's not so effective as the 90%, which represents a security concern relevant for the international community. The collapse of the JCPOA, it's important because weakened also those actors within Iran who had advocates engagement and compromise. And it reinforced a hardline narrative that diplomacy with the United States could not deliver durable economic benefit and result. There is a long list of moments in which, during 2001 invasion in Afghanistan, there was this approach, which finally led a possible diplomatic solution and cooperation with the US. So substantial effort to revive the agreement, including the one under the Biden administration, failed to overcome this mistrust. And we came to nowadays. The situation deteriorated sharply after the Hamas attack of 2023, which effectively fused the Iranian nuclear program with the broader security escalation, which was the things that Iran nuclear deal tried to prevent. Iran's strategy of indirect confrontation through proxies came under pressure, as mentioned by Bernard before, because Israel degraded Hezbollah and struck IRGC target in Syria. And the strike on Iran consulate in Damascus marked a symbolic escalation. And for the first time, in April 2024, Iran decided to launch a direct and missile and drone attack against Israel for the first time. It was the passing of a key red line, which had been prevented for a long time. Its limited effectiveness, combined with the Israel demonstrated ability to strike inside Iran, altered the deterrence equation. So the escalation continued in 2024, and eventually in June 2025, Israel launched a major strike against Iranian nuclear and missile infrastructure. Once the collapse of Assad regime removed a key buffer between Iran and Israel. So the target of Israel nuclear convention enrichment facility cannot overcome and hit some of the more hardened underground site, which require the capability that only the United States possess. That's why on June 21, US intervened directly, employing bunker-busted munition against the enrichment plants of Natanz and Fordow, and using also cruise missile against strike in the conversion facility in Isfahan. So although Washington declared the nuclear program as obliterated, the reality is more complex. There is little doubt that the damage to Iran enrichment and conversion infrastructure has been extensive, resulting in an ongoing suspension of related activities. Yet the military campaign did not eliminate Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium, which remained burdened underground tunnel near Isfahan. So Iran leverage does not solely rely on a nuclear stockpile. Following the strike, Iran suspended cooperation and monitoring activities by the IAEA at a site targeted by Iran, Israel, and the United States. And this creates a situation which is, for the first time, is not able, the agency, to monitor and to guarantee the continuity of knowledge on Iran nuclear material and activity. Paradoxically, and we came to the negotiation, the severity of the military confrontation also reshaped the diplomatic landscape and opportunity. Under indirect negotiation, which have been conducted in Oman and Geneva up to yesterday, have resumed under conditions that would have been technically unthinkable before the strike. With large-scale enrichment infrastructure severely degraded, the practical debate on zero enrichment, long considered a red line for Iran and a declared objective for Washington, may be reframed in a more flexible term. The technical extension of enrichment suspension may be now easier to negotiate than before the attack. Additional measures before proposed by Iran, such as the downblading of enriched uranium stockpile, could have also a more lasting impact given the disruption of Iran enrichment infrastructure, which may delay its ability to reconstruct the stockpile. At the same time, as mentioned by Bernard, Iran compounded weakness at the regional, domestic, and economic level has increased its vulnerability to US pressure, which peaked at the deployment of a US naval armada near the country. However, and this is the conclusion, the crucial question is strategic. Does Washington seek a transactional agreement for specific regime behavior change within the nuclear file and other negotiable area, or it's aligning more closely with Israel's transformative regional strategy, potentially aiming at long-term regime change? So if the US are opting for a transactional path, Iran will expect a tangible return for a substantial nuclear concession. And sanction relief remain central for a regime facing a crisis of domestic legitimacy, highlighted by the violent pressure of the protests mentioned before. So in this context, economic stabilization, in particular for the Pezeshkian president, is not merely a political objective, but is a condition for regime survival. So there may be space for some understanding on also some regional security dimension. However, there are some red lines that Iran will never agree upon. And the missile program is one of these, because it's the last guarantee of a bit of strategic depth in the absence of reliable air force and conventional parity. So should the negotiation collapse and the military confrontation resume, Iranian officials this time has made clear that they would respond across multiple regional theaters, targeting US assets and regional partners. And the military drills of yesterday in the Strait of Hormuz and previous drone provocation against US aircraft have clearly signaled this approach. The risk is that such response could trigger an unpredictable chain of escalation, and even an administration inclined towards risk-taking, such as the one of President Trump, would need to carefully calculate the next strategic conflict with the consequence of such a scenario. But the key point is about the final aim of the US, if they are more inclined towards a transactional agreement or they are looking for a regime change. I think that the Trump administration has looked for both approach since at least 2018. I think that the situation nowadays is the result of the withdrawal of US from the JCPOA in 2018. But now is the time that one of the two paths should be taken, or a negotiation or a military for attempting a very difficult, I would say, regime change in the country.
Thank you, Michele. Thank you, Bernard. I think you both put the framework of this present tensions with Iran, the present crisis, and the negotiation, in particular on the nuclear issue, but not only. I can invite all attendants to ask the questions in the chat. There are many questions. Maybe what we can do together is to try to reflect about the two scenarios. You know, the scenario of a war and the scenario of a negotiation. So, do you think what do you think the USA? Michele, you say the USA has two possible goals. Either negotiation on the deal or regime change. How do you assess the reinforcement of the US forces in the region? Do you think it can be a kind of first step to a real war? What kind of conflict could it be? What means of retaliations for Iran? What kind of risk would there be? And if there is a negotiation, do you think there could be a kind of deal in which, for example, as you say, Michele, there could be a kind of flexible renouncement of Iran to its enrichment program? But maybe no other means, but I suppose the counterpart for that would be also a kind of lifting of sanctions. And I see the risk, for example, that this could relegitimate the Iranian regime if there is a success of this negotiation. So how do you see these both risks? The risk of a success of a negotiation and the risk of a military confrontation. Maybe Bernard first.
Yes, you asked a good question. The military issue. So the Armada is there, very strong. The strongest army in the world is surrounding a small country, having no capacity to confront the US, that's clear. And is it only a way to make pressure for negotiation? The question was raised like that. The real aim is to bomb Iran and to try through this bombing and this military conflict to change the regime. personally, I don't see the relation between bombing Iranian facilities, nuclear, civil, military, whatever you want, and regime change. When you bomb a country, you have got more or less a national unity. We could saw that in last June, when of course the regime is hated by the people. But when the bombs from Israel and Iran touched the houses and the streets of Iran, there was somewhere a national unity to say, oh, I hate the regime, but I hate much more the people who are bombing my city. So it could be a way to give a bail to the regime, that's all, and to strengthen it, but not to solve the question of the regime. If the US is able to make and Israel, both together, are really inflicting very tough damages to Iranian society, infrastructure, and everything, people will be desperate and ready to accept anybody, anywhere, anybody coming from outside to solve the question. Solution like Iraq, where Shalabi and the US forces entered Baghdad with a complete tool for managing Iran, managing Iraq. I think in Iran it's not possible. Trying to make a war and to bring the solution is Mr. Pahlavi. It could be the scenario. Mr. Pahlavi is back. In which way Mr. Pahlavi or somebody else, but no matter the name, is he able to control all the army of the IRGC, of the mullahs, of the people supporting the regime, of the people defeated, people who are very proud of their national identity? I think it will be impossible for them, much more difficult than in Iraq, to rule the country. And so the situation, we shall have Iran as a collapsed state, with a lot of people going outside of the country. Most of the new bourgeoisie say you have no future in Iran for the next 20 years, so no choice. So I escape. I go to France, to the US, China, to anywhere. No choice. And so Iran will not be for 10, 15 years a country able to to take his legitimate seat in the Middle East. It will be a problem for Saudi Arabia. They don't want Iran, which has still the capacity of terrorism in Iran. If the more activist Islamist terrorist groups defeated in Iran, they are strong enough to make dirty things everywhere, to revive all the proxies they have. Of course, with no future, no aim, no political target, but just for the pleasure or a way to do something against fatality, against the largest country in the world. So I don't see any political outcome from bombing. And even technically, how can you change regime with missiles for killing some elite? I don't see the relation between both of them. So we have also to take into account another fact: the role of the Mossad and the Israeli intelligence in Iran. I spoke recently with somebody from the army, he's a parent of mine. He knows everything about this question of drones and intelligence and things like that. To help the Israeli forces to bomb Iran, it was possible because they had on the ground people from the Mossad able to show exactly where are the targets. And only Israel has got this network of spies and people inside Iran, being Iranians supporting Israel or Israeli coming in Iran. Doesn't matter. But they have a strong capacity, which was amazing. And so without this capacity, and the US doesn't have this capacity, it's not possible to kill this general, to kill this Ayatollah and this one. They need local support, technical support, military support. And so bombing Iran with a chirurgical, medical targets to kill this and that people is not possible by the US Army today. They have not the weapons to do so. They can only bomb Iran and destroy cities and destroy facilities. But it is not a way to have the people of Iran supporting them. If they kill 20, 1,500 leaders of the Islamic Republic, maybe they can have a popular support. But if they only bomb facilities, power station, and so on, I cannot see anybody able to lose the country after that. So this question of Mossad and intelligence people inside Iran is quite important. About the nuclear the negotiation, of course, I am dreaming about the success of 2003, the success of JCPOA, and the fact that Iran can is able to become a strong country in the Middle East, bringing peace and not war any longer, of course. But this negotiation, they are the soft way to regime change. Regime change through military action, I think, is technically impossible. I don't see in which way it could be efficient. If you are negotiating with this crazy, dirty power of the Islamic Republic today, these people are able to surrender. Not officially, they have to save the face, of course, but they know they are surrendering. And so it will be a way for the regime to change inside, to have newcomers who are in jail today to come back and to be out of the jail, taken out of the jail and take the power. And maybe Mr. Khamenei, the supreme leader, will resign or find a way to be put aside. So a soft way to regime change can be occurred, but a sustainable way, of course. The question isn't regime change. You can easily change a regime in Iran, killing people. The name will be changed, but not the fact. So I think negotiation is the only way. Very difficult, of course. If the US and Iran, after 47 years of confrontation, cultural, political, economic, in all fields, it will be a huge job to resume relation in all fields, to have back the US ambassador in Tehran. It will take time. And so rebuilding the relation between the two countries is a major challenge. And the question is that, in which way Iran and Iranians will be able to rebuild a relation with the US, not the US of the Cold War, an imperialist US, but a new US. Of course, US of Trump is special US, but they have to resume relation with the new country, not the regime, the US of the Cold War. It is a huge challenge, political challenge. The question is now, when you are looking at the political personnel in Iran, you have got the hardliners. They want war with Iran. They want Islamic regime to be stronger in the war. They know they are defeated, but they will try to do something. You have got some the old revolutionary people of 78. They call that in Iran the Panjawafti. Panjawafti means 78 in Persian. The people of 78. Those people who are liberals, supporting human rights of Carter, supporting independence of Iran against imperialism. Most of the Marxists were in this field. Traditional nationalists of Iran, thinking the new elite of Iran, built up by the Shah, thinking that, oh, I am engineer now, thank you, Mr. Shah, but I want a little bit of democracy. Not possible. So I am opposed not to your policy, Mr. Shah Pahlavi, but I am opposed to your politics. So I am ready to support those who want to change it or to have a new regime. Those revolutionary people, they are still there. Most of them, of course, have been in jail, killed, or in exile. A lot of them are still there. They are the reformists against the hardliners. These reformists, the problem is that they have never the courage to take decision and to oppose the regime, the hardliners, not the capacity or the will to do so. But today, after the slaughter of January, they have no choice. So, Mr. Pezeshkian, you are a good physician, a good man, no problem with you, but do something. Tell you that don't accept this slaughter, don't accept this situation. I am opposed to the regime, but he knows, of course, he is weak. He cannot be challenging the RGC and the hardliners, too weak. Or he is scared that being killed or having all these supporters put in jail completely. So he tries to do something inside the system. But this time of tennis playing with two camps, hardliners and reformists together, this time is over. And now something has to be done. And so why is there nobody inside the regime able to say, oh, let's take a decision, a strong decision to accept a negotiation with the US on this and this field and to have a lift of the sanction? Maybe. We can find some people inside the country, but today they are waiting for the popular support. I go on a few minutes on this point. I made a map. I tried to share with you this map. Yeah, I tried to. How is it possible to?
Maybe Bernard, because we after that I come back to Michele, and we have also a
Yeah,
question about the regional environment
yeah.
afterwards.
So
But maybe you can
wait.
also be precise, Bernard, about what you meant with Reza Pahlavi as a puppet of Israel, because
Yeah,
it's a qualification which is quite
tough.
challenged by some questions, and the question say there were some demonstrators calling for Reza Pahlavi. So how can you measure his real support in Iran? And do you think Pezeshkian could become a kind of leader of the reformist side if there is a possible evolution of the country? And then we come to Michele. No?
Okay, I do agree with you. Pezeshkian could be this Bonaparte, somebody strong enough to say the game is over, let's take a decision. But personally, I think he's not able to do so. But people can be found in Iran to do so. It's a matter of political support, and they are waiting, these reformists or these people able to change something, they are waiting for the real popular support. The last demonstrations in Iran in January were not, a lot of people didn't take part in the demonstration, people, even, especially people from Azerbaijan and the upper bourgeoisie of Tehran and the poor popular suburbs of Tehran didn't take part in the demonstration, which were very political and organized from outside by the royalists and Mr. Pahlavi, among others. And so, seeing that there is no really, for the time being, real popular support of the middle class, of the elite of Iran, those people who are fed up with the regime, but they want to have their own country strong enough in the future. But these people are not, for the time being, able to do so. So, in this empty room of leaders, Mr. Pahlavi is really the man who emerged from nothing. And it was a good, not a surprise, because the royalists are demonstrating in Iran for years and years now in Iran. But he's the only man known in Iran, the only name known in Iran. And so, with the support of foreign diaspora, with strong media support, of course, he appears clearly to be the guy, the only guy in which we can trust. But the question is behind that. And he was not able, during years and years, to build up in the US or in Iran a strong royalist political party, having on the field branches able to control demonstration, to control a revolt, to control an upheaval. When Khomeini was making the revolution, he had on the ground, inside Iran, not in Neuf-le-Château, said nothing in Neuf-le-Château, but inside Iran, he had a lot of revolutionary committee in all the mosques of Iran. In 50,000 mosques of Iran, he had got a group of people supporting him. So it was not a problem for him to enter Iran, since the revolution was already done by the people inside Iran. So Mr. Pahlavi is a good guy, he's sympathetic, but he has no control of the situation inside Iran, even if courageous people are telling, I prefer the Shah than the Mullahs, that's pretty clear. A lot of people in Iran prefer the Shah or anybody else than the Mullahs. But the question is what to do after ruling and managing a country, having supporting 47 years of Islamic Republic. It's not an easy task. And you need for that to have a strong, implemented and sustainable power inside your country. Is not obviously the case for Mr. Pahlavi, in my opinion now.
Okay, Michele. So the scenario of a successful negotiation or the scenario of a conflict, how do you see that?
We start with the second to some extent, which is the fact that Khamenei has tried to manage, is the longest to some extent ruler in authoritarian, semi-authoritarian regime up to nowadays, because he's always been very prudent in trying to balance the actions of the Islamic republics, not in a way to create a major risk to the regime, And nowadays, the revolutionary, in the revolutionary space of the revolutionary guards, you have a second generation of actors, which grew during the phase in which Iran expanded its influence in the Middle East after the 2003 war in Iraq and what occurred with the major under Qasem Soleimani influence in the region, which are asking for a more tough response, because after the killing of Soleimani in 2020, Iran responded with just a quite symbolic attack on a US base in Iraq, which was already telephoned to and communicated before in advance with the US in order to manage any possible escalation. The same, to some extent, occurred after the last attack in 2025, in June, with an attack on a Qatar base, which is, again, quite managed in terms of the escalation of tensions. Now the situation is quite different, because as I mentioned before, the Iranian deterrent is to some extent has been significantly exposed in this period. And now there is a mounting pressure on the supreme leader, not only to respond significantly, because now Iran is cornered and there is no way that to absorb another attack on Iranian military or nuclear facility. I do not know with what we're concerned the nuclear target. I do not know what they can hit, because mostly the most sensitive part regarding the conversion activity has been hit. There are just the mines, the milling parts of Iran nuclear program, the Bushehr nuclear reactor, which is clearly out of any possible attack by the both countries. So there is a significant pressure in order to be tough this time, and Iran is signaling well clearly that this time is the last time in which they will be absorbing without trying to do everything possible to transform these constrained military operation in something more regional. And this is also include the position of other regional actors, because after 2020 withdrawal from the JCPOA and the attack on Mohsen Fakhrizadeh and Qasem Soleimani, Iran retaliated to some extent quite chirurgically also in the region with some oil facility in the Saudi Arabia. And this has changed to some extent the position of Saudi Arabia through the time, which finally led to the mediation with China of a kind of an agreement with Iran regarding the regional security framework. And nowadays, both Turkey and Saudi Arabia are pushing for pressuring the United States to refrain from a military operation, even because both are concerned now that to some extent a weakened Iran can balance the more regional ambition of Israel, which is nowadays very strong in the region. So the position, the fact that to some extent the Iranian regime still is in place, is also a way for Turkey and Saudi Arabia to counterbalance this growing. The attack of Israel in Qatar to kill one of the leading actors of Hamas has been another relevant moment in the Middle East, because this is changing also the way in which Israel is trying to make military operation throughout the region. So this is to some extent, this is the first time that to some extent from 2023 that this military pressure on Iran can go out of hands and starting a larger confrontation. Maybe the position of Israel is saying that Iran is bluffing. Finally, they have not the capability to respond significantly, considering also the huge armada of the aircraft of Abraham Lincoln and Gerald Ford, which are in the region. But significantly risk is present. And so far, the United States is having this kind of a more pro-risk attitude. But it was about chirurgical activities. There is no place for operations such as the one in Venezuela in Iran. Because mostly there is a leadership, there is a structure, there is the IGC, there is the Basij, there are several layers of complexity which made impossible to decapitate with just one strike the Iranian military apparatus. So as for the military confrontation, I would say that despite this, is still something, a tangible risk. Because I would say it's coherent with the decision taken by the Trump administration in the first mandate and also in the second. As I mentioned before, maximum pressure campaign was about constraining Iran and attacking Iran. And this is the second point regarding the negotiations, It's about, if you want to escape from a more tough position, you have to bargain something. And to bargain something, you have to recognize, to some extent, the right of the other parts. International relation that we are having is about the relation. There should be a relation. And the nuclear program of Iran is the relation that Iran has used to force the international community also to bargain with them. Because nowadays, maybe a significant containment of Iran through economic and also military pressure may be the more interesting position, because you're avoiding a legitimization of the regime without negotiating with the regime itself. You are pressuring the country in order to create the condition for long-term internal change. But this cannot be done because Iran has the nuclear leverage still in place. With no monitoring capability of the IAEA, Iran could, to some extent, use its military, its nuclear stockpile and equipment remaining in order to try to acquire nuclear weapons to some extent, despite all the declaration of the country. So it's very difficult. And I think that there could be a way. It's very good what you mentioned, Maxime, the fact that negotiation to some extent legitimate, and this is another dilemma after the January protest. But there's no other way out of this, because I think to some extent, trying to constrain the nuclear activities under a kind of an agreement with also, there's been some reports talking about extension up to 3 years of the not enrichment in the country, which will be a significant agreement, at least not so long. The Iranian JCPOA, the nuclear agreement was criticized by many because it was short. In reality, it was 10 years with some feature up to 40 years. And now we'll be agreeing a 3 years stop of freezing of Iran nuclear activities. But it will offer the opportunity also to look within the country and see what will be changing domestically and prevent a more tougher solution. Just a last mention regarding the reformist, which is very relevant. I think that it's quite clear that the reformists attempt to reform from within can be possible, as always be possible, also in contexts in which the power can be to some extent more balanced upon the executive. In Iran, the dual system with the theocratic institution prevents, to some extent, this reform from within to happen, because each time they're trying to force, Mir Hossein Mousavi is still in jail, is still at home since 2009. And this is clear, outlining how a reform from within cannot happen, because to some extent, the risk is a direct challenge to the regime, which will be led to some tough confrontation. So in order to sum up, I would say that the military risk is real and is relevant also to go beyond the region, and which is quite important. And the negotiation is very hard, but it can be a way in particular for the nuclear field in order to at least give the international agency the possibility to inspect again the facility in Iran. Iran is the sole country with such a level of enrichment with no monitoring activities. We moved from a context in 2018 where Iran was the more inspected and monitored country in the world to a situation in which Iran is the least inspected country in the world. And this is something about also the chain of reaction which occurred after the withdrawal of the 2018 deal, which should be questioned to some extent.
Thank you, Michele. Time is running. I would like to address another question in the chat about the regional situation. How do you see the regional situation? You said, Bernard, that the proxies had been weakened in Lebanon, Hezbollah, in Syria with the fall of Bashar al-Assad, but in Iraq, I think it's still the Shiites running the country, so there are close relations. There is also the issue of Yemen, where Iran is present. There was this agreement also between Saudi Arabia and Iran of normalization of their relations. So how do you see this conflict in the regional environment? Both of you, we still have 20 minutes, so I let you a couple of minutes, each of you.
Yeah.
Bernard first.
Yeah, I think that this question of the proxies has been very too much known as a major issue in the Middle East. Iran being the terrorist state which brings instability in all the region. As a matter of fact, Iran has understood, especially after October 7, that the situation is out of control for him. After what happened in against Daesh in Syria, they have known that Bashar al-Assad is not a strong ally. They cannot support him any longer because they're not able to control the country. And so Iran have understood, in my opinion, especially after the killing of Qasem Soleimani, which was a key person to controlling the system. They have seen that they couldn't control any longer the whole region from Yemen to Lebanon and Iraq. Of course, Iraq is something else since they had 8 years of war with Iraq, so they need to see exactly what's going on in Iraq. They are very concerned about the future of Iraq. But there was a major political shift in the Iranian policy after October 7, because it was imposed by Hamas. Iran was not behind it. And Israel wanted Hezbollah to attack Israel, really not missile rocket, but using the missiles. And Iran prevented Hezbollah to do so, because they knew that if Hezbollah was using the missile, which will be a very danger for Israel, Iran can, of course, control that, but it will be a war against Iran. And Iran was not in a situation to have a war, a strong war with Israel. And so they have understood that it is not possible to support Hezbollah any longer. They have lost Hezbollah not because exactly the Israelis have done what they have done, but before they abandoned the Hezbollah because they have decided that it's no longer possible to use this way to protect the city. They know the weakness of Iran, the problem of economy, the nuclear issue, which was becoming crazy. And so they had made the choice in April 23 to bomb Israel with a huge number of missiles and drones. It needed at that time the US army, the British army, the French army, the Jordan army, and Israel to control all these drones and missiles falling on Israel. It shows that Iran now is ready to define itself from the national state, from the national territory, and no longer using the proxy. It was a major demonstration that they have changed their national defense policy. So the proxy now are just a burden. They need money. They cannot control them, especially the Houthi. The Houthi are doing their own job on their own side with Saudi Arabia and trying to get strong in the Red Sea. So for the time being, other thing important is the relationship to Saudi Arabia and Iran under the sponsorship of China. China said that, okay, I need your oil and your gas, so I don't want any war in the Strait of Hormuz. So may find a way to have close relations. That's all. And all the regional capacity, all the regional policy of Iran has changed in these years. And so the regional situation is that, of course, Saudi Arabia doesn't want Iran to be a strong country, but they know they can control it. They can control it, and so they don't want a war because Iran is able to do very bad things against Israel. And the Israeli, as far as I know, they know that the last time Iran was bombing Israel during the last war of June, 50 Iranian missiles have reached the soil of Israel. 50. It's not nothing. It's not nothing. And so Israel is not ready for that. And for the time being, they know that fighting with Iran is not a good solution. That's the reason why I don't see why Mr. Trump will use all this armada for the time being.
Thank you. Interesting. Michele, how do you see the regional environment?
Yeah, I think that for a long time Iran has used this forward posture defense in the region, which was, a way to compound its strategic rocket missile short-term range capability in order to put pressure on Iran through proxies. Now this has already been totally destroyed, this posture. And it's interesting to know that also within the chain of the protesters in Iran, there was some who said no more financing Gaza and no more financing Hezbollah. We need to save the money for the people. And this is something more relevant because it's a crisis of not only the defense posture and the foreign as a regional posture, but also about the symbolic and ideological posture of influencing the region, which are both under security and significant constraint. So now Iran decided, as mentioned by Bernard, to move into the red line of trying to attack in 2024. The first range of attack was through missile and drone. It was mostly focused on some military area and bases in Iran, in Israel. So it was possible to for the anti-missile forces of Israel to intercept most of them. The second attack had been more impactful, the one of November, if I'm not wrong, because in this case, the attack has been covered a large portion of Israel. And so it was very hard for Israel to intercept any of them. And the ballistic missile stockpile remained on Iran is as significantly lower, has been impacted by the attack on the missile infrastructure by Israel, but is still present. And so in the future, any possible regionalization and escalation of future activities might lead to a new attack towards Israel, even though it will be mostly adopted in the same approach of November. So according as for the regional framework, we are ongoing in a revolution of the relation in the region, but the Shiite minority are still there. And so it is important to prevent that these Shiite minorities in a situation of a critical regional conflict should finally return into a more aggressive posture towards the country in which they are living in order to defend, which, or to some extent, side with an escalations is an attack on Iran. So I think it's also to be taken into account the fact that the possible destabilization regarding a military confrontation can be also come again into a new sectarian divide in the region.
Okay, I don't see other questions in the chat, so I think we are going close to the end of the webinar. If I understood well, but correct me, I let you words of conclusions for each of you. There is still the possibility, the scenario of a war is not totally excluded, but there is still a scenario of a possible successful negotiation with which we could be able to find a solution to the nuclear program, and which could maybe be connected with a kind of evolution of the Iranian regime towards a more reformist path. Would it be, I would say, a positive scenario, or didn't I sum up this debate? So Bernard first.
Scenario. I gave a phone call to God, and God told me I don't know anything about Iran. One point important is that the nuclear issue, which I repeated, we do all agree on that, is a keystone of everything. Iran knows now they are not able to rebuild the nuclear facilities they have. It will cost a lot of money, and they need the money for the people today to improve a little bit the economic situation. They cannot at the same time improve the economic situation and rebuild the nuclear facility. They know also that the Mossad is strong in Iran at the top level of the regime, and that if they are rebuilding two centrifuges in one corner, immediately the Mossad will know exactly where are these two centrifuges working again. So I think Iran has more or less abandoned its nuclear project and ready to compromise a lot on nuclear issue just to reach an agreement on the economic situation, which is the main thing. And the main problem will be, in my opinion, not seeing who will be back in Iran, Mr. Pahlavi or Mr. Teherani, Mr. So-and-so. It is just a matter of a short-term issue. It will be the process of management during years and years in Iran to rebuild the country, to make the country united again with those who are supporting Islamic Republic, those who are against Islamic Republic, those who made a lot of money because of the corruption they had. And so rebuilding the national capacity, the cultural capacity of Iran will be the main thing we have to look after in the future. Of course, there are a lot of capacities in Iran. You see the number of people, filmmakers, artists, intellectuals, engineers. In Iran has the largest number of engineers in the Middle East. These engineers are making weapons now and nuclear facilities. They are maybe able to do something else. And so all this rebuilding of Iran in economy, in technology, in culture, in personal relation in the families, because families are being broken. Many films made in Iran have shown the break and the collapse of a family because one member of family are supporting the regime and others are not. And so Iran has to be rebuilt completely from the bottom. That's the main thing we have to look after. Since, of course, Europe can help in this field. The US cannot do everything from Washington. European and companies especially has got a good experience of Iran during all this time. So they can find maybe the way, even in spite of the step back, European companies and European states are able, in my opinion, to play a role between Iran and the US to prevent the country also to fall in the hand of Russia or China or any other countries.
Yes, we did not mention a lot the role of Europe. Of course, historically,
Yeah.
they have been involved in the negotiation, but it's true that at the time being, we have the impression that everything is more managed directly by the US.
Yes, but I am very also optimistic, and I am still dreaming that Europe can play a role again. When Strauss-Fisher and Lefebvre went to Tehran in October 2009 or 3, it was 3 cowboys going to Iran, and they were successful. So I'm still dreaming about the capacity of Europe to do something, but just a dream.
Michele.
Yeah. Now the equation it's kind of a sum of uncertainties. It's very hard to provide scenarios because it's a moment in which it's very hard to read the present in terms of what occurred in the past, because there's been a lot of disruption which are compounding in terms of providing a long-term vision. I would just comment a bit on Europe to some extent. I think that the fate of Europe has been, Europe was effective in 2003 because it was a clear goal, which was to prevent another war after 2003 war in Iraq. Nowadays, I think that within the European capitals, there is not a clear approach regarding how to manage also the relation with the regime which has killed so many protesters a few months ago. And this is clear after the attack of US against the facility, which was hailed by some countries' capitals, in particular Germany, if I'm not wrong. And this it's going to, I think the EU should recalibrate its long-term interest in this issue, because now there is an unbalanced approach between the long-term regime legitimacy and dealing with the regime, or trying to wait for something else to occur. Nowadays, Iran has sealed all its nuclear tunnel more sensitive in Isfahan. All the tunnel entrance have been sealed in a way to prevent cruise missile to enter this facility where the stockpile of enriched uranium is mostly believed to be underground. And also to prevent, as Bernard said before, possible infiltration from within the country as a result of a major war. So Iran is preparing for a confrontation to some extent. But nowadays, it's very unpredictable. And I think it's the time in which, in particular, Europe, and I would conclude on that, should rethink about a long-term strategy within Iran, within the new approach of the US. I think that to some extent nowadays, EU capital approach towards Iran is a sub-level of a wider approach within the Trump administration. Instead, I think that Europe should think about its interest in Iran by itself, without trying to bargain then and balancing then and compromising on a wider relation with the transatlantic relation with the US. In this way, I think the EU could return into a role into a mediation within this issue, which is very, very difficult to predict how this can evolve in the future. When I'm talking about the future, I'm talking about next week. This justify the amount of uncertainty we are living in this space.
Thank you very much. We don't have time anymore to continue the debate, but we know it's a very complicated crisis and very complicated environment. So I retain the word unpredictable that you mentioned. We have an imprevisible president in the US, and we have an unpredictable situation with Iran. But I hope that you were able. Thank you very much for your analysis and for your participation to this webinar. I hope you were able to develop very interesting arguments and analysis to understand at least the constraints of each scenario and the possibilities for each evolution. So thank you once again for having been with us tonight. As usual, we shall make a replay of this webinar to allow for an external audience to see again this debate, and we hope that everything will go for the best, even if it's very difficult. And to everyone who attended this debate tonight, I wish you a very good evening. So thank you, and see you soon. The next webinar will take place in March on European budgetary issues.
Thank you. Thank you to all.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you. Thank you so much.